April 22, 2020 for just another Monday evening in Yukon, Oklahoma, a quiet suburban neighborhood where the biggest disturbance was usually a barking dog or kids playing too loudly in the cul-de-sac. But that night, something far more deadly unfolded inside a charming two-story home on Maplewood Drive. By morning, the house stood eerily silent. 5 bodies lay inside, each one brutally taken. The blood-stained walls, the overturned furniture, the lingering scent of gunpowder. This wasn't just a crime scene, it was a massacre, and at the center of it all was a man who, until that night, had been seen as nothing short of an upstanding citizen, a devoted father, a loving husband and a hard-working provider. But something inside him snapped. What could drive a seemingly normal man to commit an act so monstrous that even seasoned investigators were left shaken? Was it financial ruin? A hidden darkness lurking beneath his smile? Or was there something far more chilling at play? Amid the carnage, there was one survivor, a witness to the unthinkable, the only person who could shed lights on the horror of that night. But their story only deepened the mystery and left everyone with one burning question. Why? This case would grip the nation, sparking debates about mental health, family secret, and just how well we really know the people closest to us. The media will call it the Candy Family Massacre, a name that would forever stain the once pristine reputation of a man no one suspected. But what really happened that night? What pushed him over the edge? And most importantly, could it have been stopped? Before we dive into this bone-chilling case, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. Here at Crime Docket, we bring you the most gripping true crime stories, cases that will keep you up at night, questioning everything you thought you know about human nature. Now let's uncover the truth behind the Candy Family Massacre from outside. The Candy family looked like embodiment of the American dream. Their two-story colonial-style home, painted a pristine white with navy shutters, sat on a neatly manicured lawn in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in town. A tire swing hung from the old oak tree in their front yard, a silent witness to the year of laughter and carefree childhood. To outsiders, the Candys had it all. Jonathan Candy, 42, was a respected businessman who had built his real estate firm from the ground up. He was known for his firm handshake, sharp suits, and the kind of confidence that made people trust him immediately. He provided well for his family, ensuring they had everything they could possibly need. His wife, Lindsay, 39, was the perfect complement to his success. She was the quintessential mother, involved in every aspect of their children's lives. PTA meetings, soccer games, school fundraisers. She was always there, a warm smile on her face. Together, they gave the impression of a couple deeply in love, high school sweethearts who had beaten the odds and built a beautiful life. Their children were just as remarkable. Dylan, the eldest at 18, was a star athlete, well-liked by his peers and teachers alike. He had just received an acceptance letter from a prestigious university, a moment of pride for the entire family. Ethan, 14, was quieter but just as accomplished, excelling in both academics and music. He played the piano beautifully, filling the house with melodies that Lindsay often said made their home feel like a dream. Lucas, 12, was the mischievous one, full of energy and always cracking jokes. He had an infectious laughter that could brighten even the darkest of days. And then there was the youngest, a 10-year-old boy who, unbeknownst to him, would soon become the sole survivor of a nightmare. Neighbors saw the Candy family as the picture of happiness. They attended church every Sunday, hosted backyard barbecues, and never seemed to be anything but a model of stability. No criminal record, no domestic violence calls, no warning signs, at least none that anyone noticed. But behind closed doors, something was looming, something dark. Jonathan was under increasing pressure at work. The real estate market had been unpredictable, and deals that once seemed like sure things were slipping through his fingers. He had built his business on his reputation, and with financial troubles looming, he became irritable, snapping at his family over minor things. Lindsay, always the supportive wife, tried to keep the household together, but even she couldn't ignore the shift in his demeanor. The man who had once showered her with love and affection was becoming distant, distracted, and, at times, cold. There were whispers among a few close friends that Jonathan might be having an affair. He worked long hours and had started spending nights at the office. Lindsay brushed off the rumors, but a lingering doubt gnawed at her. Still, she kept up appearances, refusing to let anyone see the cracks forming in the seemingly perfect facade. Dylan, on the cusp of adulthood, had begun to rebel. He stayed out later than he should, sometimes missing curfew entirely. He argued with his father more and more, their once close bond fraying. Ethan and Lucas sensed the tension, but stayed out of it, retreating into their own worlds of music and schoolwork. As for the youngest, he remained blissfully unaware of the growing unease that had settled over the household. To him, his family was still his safe place. his foundation. He had no idea that everything he knew and loved was about to shatter.
Then came the final straw. Jonathan's financial troubles had reached a breaking point. He had been hiding the truth from Lindsay, making risky investments in an attempt to dig himself out. But instead of solving his problems, they only made things worse. The walls were closing in, and he saw no way out. On the surface, nothing seemed amiss. The family continued with their daily routines. The boys went to school, Lindsay kept up with her commitments, and Jonathan maintained his mask of composure. But behind his eyes, something had changed. Darkness had taken root, growing stronger with each passing day. The night before it all happened, neighbors saw the Candys enjoying dinner on their back patio. The sound of laughter floated through the air, the warm glow of string lights casting a golden hue over the perfect family. To anyone watching, it was an idyllic scene. A family bound by love, sharing a peaceful evening together. No one could have known that it was their last. April 22nd, 2024. A normal evening, until it wasn't. The sun had long since set over the quiet suburban neighborhood of Willow Creek, casting long shadows over rows of identical houses. The Candy home, like all the others, stood in eerie stillness, its windows glowing softly from within. It had been an unremarkable day for the Candy family. Homework at the dining table, dinner together, and the low hum of the television playing in the background. Nothing seemed amiss, nothing hinted at the bloodbath that would follow. As the night deepened, the neighborhood settled into silence. Lights flickered off one by one, leaving only the occasional porch light to illuminate the darkness. Inside the Candy home, 10-year-old Oliver was tucked into bed, his mother pressing a gentle kiss on his forehead before whispering goodnight. His two older brothers had already retreated to their rooms, scrolling through their phones before sleep claimed them. Jonathan Candy, the head of the household, sat in the living room, staring blankly at the darkened television screen. A storm was brewing within him, a darkness so deep that not even he could have predicted what he was about to do.
Sometime after midnight, the first gunshot rang out. It was sharp, sudden, an unnatural break in the peaceful night. In the master bedroom, Meredith Candy barely had time to react before a single bullet shattered her skull, silencing her forever. Her body slumped against the bed, a pool of blood staining the sheets beneath her. There was no scream, no struggle, just a swift and calculated execution. Jonathan, still gripping the gun tightly, stepped away from the bed. His face was emotionless, his movements eerily methodical. He turned toward the hallway, his footsteps muffled against the carpet. The house was still, except for the faint creaks of the wooden floorboards beneath him. The door to the first bedroom stood slightly ajar. Inside, 18-year-old Dylan lay curled under a blanket, his face illuminated by the dim glow of his phone. He never heard the door open. He never saw his father raise the gun. A second shot echoed in the night, sending a bullet piercing through his temple. The phone slipped from his hand, landing with a dull thud on the carpet. The screen went dark. Jonathan moved to the next room. 14-year-old Ethan slept soundly, his breathing deep and even. He stood over him for a moment, his shadow cast long against the wall. Another shot, another life stolen in an instant. Then to the next room, where 12-year-old Lucas lay curled up in his bed, his breath slow and even. Yet again he ended the life of another son. Blood splattered across the walls. The scent of gunpowder hung thick in the air, but there was no time for hesitation. He had one more stop. Jonathan walked toward the last room at the end of the hall, Oliver's room. He turned the knob and pushed the door open slowly. His heart beat steady, his grip firm, but as he stepped inside, he froze. The boy lay motionless beneath his covers, his small body rising and falling in rhythmic sleep. For reasons unknown, perhaps a flicker of mercy, perhaps a sliver of hesitation, Jonathan did not pull the trigger. Instead, he pointed the gun to his head and ended his own life. Hours passed. The sun slowly crept over the horizon, its golden rays filtering through the blinds. Inside Oliver's room, the world was still innocent. He stirred beneath his blanket, yawning, stretching. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, the remnants of a dream still lingering in his mind. And then he stepped into the hallway. The sight that met him was beyond comprehension. A dark stain spread across the carpet outside his brother's room. The metallic scent in the air was overwhelming. He took a hesitant step forward, his small, sock-clad foot pressing into something wet and sticky. His breath hitched. He turned his head toward his parents' room. The door was open. The sheets were drenched in red. His mother's body was still, and her once warm arms now lifeless. A sharp cry caught in his throat, but no sound came out. He stumbled back, his hands trembling as he reached for the nearest phone. The call came through at exactly 7:12 a.m. The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady. 911. What's your emergency? A child's voice, small and shaking, barely above a whisper. My family, they won't wake up. There was silence on the other end. The dispatcher remained professional, but the weight of the words settled heavy in the air. Can you tell me what happened? Are you hurt? The boy's breath was ragged, uneven. There's blood. Everywhere. The dispatcher's fingers flew over the keyboard, typing rapidly. Stay on the line with me. What's your name? Sweetheart. Oliver. Oliver. Honey, I want you to listen to me. You're doing so good. Help is on the way. Okay. Stay where you are. A pause. Then, a question no child should ever have to ask. Are they dead? The dispatcher hesitated for only a moment. Just stay with me, Oliver. In the background, the faint sound of sirens began to grow louder. Help was coming. But for Oliver Candy, life as he knew it had already ended.
The Yukon police arrived at a scene straight out of a nightmare. The air inside the Candy residence was thick with a metallic scent of blood, and eerie silence hanging over the house like a death shroud. Officers moved cautiously through the dimly lit hallways, their boots sticking slightly to the floor as they stepped through patches of dried blood. What had happened here? In each of the children's bedroom, their bodies lay undisturbed, their faces peaceful, almost as if they had simply drifted into eternal sleep. A few stuffed animals had tumbled to the floor. Across the hall, in the master's bedroom, Mrs. Candy was found sprawled across the bed, her nightgown stained deep red. Her hands were still clutching the sheets, fingers curled as if she had fought against an unseen force in her final moments. Jonathan Candy, the man who, by all accounts, had been a loving father and devoted husband, was slumped against the headboard, a gun still clutched in his right hand with a bullet wound to his temple told the story that the scene seemed to want to convey a murder-suicide. Case closed, and yet something felt off. The seasoned detectives exchanged wary glances. These kinds of cases were tragically common, but there were too many details that didn't add up. Detective Samuel Grayson, a veteran with over 2 decades on the force, stepped closer to Jonathan Candy's body. His hand hovered over his chin, rubbing thoughtfully. "No note," he muttered. Nothing left behind to explain why a man with no history of violence would snap like this. No signs of forced entry, added Officer Lee, scanning the master's bedroom.
Detective Grayson knelt beside the bed, inspecting the gun still gripped in Jonathan's hand. It was possible that he had shot himself, but something about the position of the body seemed unnatural. Jonathan's left hand rested at his side, relaxed. His right hand still loosely held the gun, but there was no spatter on his fingers, no visible gunpowder residue. That was odd. A self-inflicted shot at close range would have left traces of gunpowder burns on his skin. "Bag the weapon," Grayson ordered. "I want a full ballistic analysis." The coroner arrived shortly after, surveying the gruesome scene with the detached professionalism that came from years of experience. Dr. Elaine Carter took her time examining the bodies before glancing up at Grayson. "I'll confirm at autopsy, but just from a preliminary look, something doesn't sit right with this. The angle of the gunshot wound on Jonathan. It's possible, but not typical for a suicide." Grayson's stomach tightened. He had a gut feeling that this was far from an open and shut case. As officers combed through the house, they found no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. It was as if the Candy family had gone to bed expecting nothing out of the ordinary, only to never wake up. The neighbors were questioned. None of them had heard gunshots, which was strange. Even with the Candy home being somewhat isolated, at least one of the shots should have been loud enough to raise alarm. But no one had reported anything unusual. No screaming, no sounds of a struggle. Officer Lee continued his sweep of the house and stopped in front of the fireplace mantel. A row of framed family photos lined the wooden shelf, each one capturing a moment frozen in time. Jonathan and his wife laughing at a summer picnic, the children playing in the park, the whole family smiling at a birthday party. They seemed happy and normal. But one photo caught his eye. It had been turned face down. Lee hesitated, then picked it up and flipped it over. His breath hitched. It was a recent picture of the entire Candy family. Except someone had scratched out Jonathan's face. Deep, angry gouges had torn through the glass and into the photograph beneath. Lee called Grayson over, and the detective studied the picture with narrowed eyes. This wasn't done in a fit of rage, he murmured. This took time. Could Mrs. Candy have been afraid of her husband? Lee suggested. Could she have been the one to do this? Grayson shook his head. Maybe, but if she feared him enough to deface his picture, why not leave? Why not tell someone?
Something was deeply wrong here. The further they looked, the darker the truth became. And whatever that truth was, it wasn't as simple as a man snapping and slaughtering his family. Hours later, as the crime scene unit continued collecting evidence, Officer Lee went outside to get some fresh air. That's when he noticed something else. In the muddy earth beneath the back porch, there were footprints. Small, barefoot footprints leading away from the house. "Sir," he called out, his voice tight with unease. "We might have a problem." Grayson stepped outside, his eyes following Lee's gaze to the tracks in the dirt. A chill ran down his spine. Someone had left the house, and they weren't wearing shoes, but no one had seen them. No one had reported anyone wandering the area. Who had walked away from the Candy residence that night, and where were they now? Friends and co-workers started coming forward with eerie details about Jonathan in the weeks leading up to the massacre. What at first seemed like the usual stresses of life had in hindsight become a chilling prelude to the horror that would unfold. Jonathan had always been a reserved man, but those who knew him best noticed an undeniable shift in his behavior. He had grown distant, skipping work without explanation, letting calls go unanswered, and ignoring messages from colleagues who once considered him reliable. He had begun showing up late, disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes, and when asked if everything was all right, he would force a smile and say, "Just tired." His responses were short, hollow. Something was wrong, but no one pressed him hard enough to find out what. Then came the financial inconsistencies. Co-workers recalled Jonathan mentioning financial stress, but nothing extreme, certainly nothing that suggested he was about to empty his entire savings account. Yet, just days before the murders, that's exactly what he did. Bank records showed that he withdrew everything, leaving his balance at zero. Where did the money go? Investigators speculated he may have used it to cover debts or fund his final days before carrying out whatever grim plan had taken root in his mind. But no clear paper trail existed. The money had vanished, just like the man Jonathan was. A deeper look into Jonathan's life unveiled even darker secrets. Investigators seized his computer and phone, searching for any clues that might explain his drastic change. What they found chilled them to the bone. His late-night internet searches painted a horrifying picture of a man on the edge of something unspeakable. Among the queries were phrases like, "How to kill your family painlessly," "What happens after you die?" "Can ghosts haunt murderers?" The weight of these searches was suffocating. The first phrase suggested premeditation. He wasn't merely fantasizing about an escape from his problems. He was researching execution methods. The second query hinted at either curiosity or fear, a man grappling with what lay beyond the veil of life and death. And the third? That was the one that unsettled investigators the most. Had Jonathan felt guilty before he even committed the crime? Did he believe that the spirits of those he was about to slaughter would come back to torment him? As detectives dug deeper, another discovery sent shivers down their spines. 2 months before the killings, Jonathan had taken out a massive life insurance policy on his wife and children. The payout, should anything happen to them, was substantial enough to ensure financial security for the rest of his life. This revelation forced investigators to ask a terrifying question. Had he planned their deaths all along? Was this a calculated move to secure a payout and start fresh? Or was this the desperate act of a crumbling mind spiraling into madness? The timeline started to make a disturbing kind of sense. The insurance policy had been finalized, his bank account drained, and his behavior had grown increasingly erratic. Witnesses recalled moments that seemed insignificant at the time but now felt like puzzle pieces to a monstrous picture. His wife's best friend mentioned that just weeks prior, she had confided in her about Jonathan's mood swings and unpredictable outbursts. One night, she had even considered taking the children and leaving for a few days, but Jonathan had convinced her otherwise, promising that things would get better. They never did. His co-workers recounted overhearing bizarre conversations, moments where Jonathan seemed lost in thought before muttering things like, "None of it will matter soon," or "What if there's nothing after this?" He was unraveling before their eyes, but no one understood the depth of his turmoil until it was too late. Perhaps the most unsettling detail came from Jonathan's neighbor, an elderly man who had lived next door for over a decade. He recalled seeing Jonathan standing outside in the middle of the night, staring blankly at his own house. No cigarette, no phone, just standing there, motionless. When asked what he was doing, Jonathan simply said, "Just thinking." It was as if he was already mourning something that hadn't yet happened. Then, there were the sounds. The same neighbor later mentioned that, in the nights leading up to the murders, He had heard strange noises coming from the house, muffled arguments, things being thrown, and once, in the dead of night, a single, eerie laugh that didn't sound quite like Jonathan at all. When asked if he had considered calling the police, he admitted he hadn't. After all, people argue, things fall, and sometimes people laugh in strange ways. No one ever expects the worst. Looking at everything together, the case against Jonathan grew more ominous. The insurance policy, the money, the online searches, and the strange behavior, all signs pointed to a meticulously crafted plan, a descent into darkness carefully executed over time. But there was one problem. No one could say why. There was no major debt, no clear affair, and no sudden tragedy that might have sent him over the edge. On paper, Jonathan had an ordinary life, one that many would envy, a good job, a loving wife, and beautiful children. But beneath the surface, something had been rotting away, unseen by those around him until it was too late. Had Jonathan meticulously planned the murder of his entire family, or had he been a man at war with himself, fighting against a darkness that eventually consumed him?
The investigation was far from over, but one thing was clear: Jonathan's story was not one of sudden madness. It was a slow unraveling, a descent into an abyss that had been waiting for him all along. And now, the world was left to wonder, had they all missed the signs, or had Jonathan simply been too far gone to save? Yukon, Oklahoma, was a quiet town where everyone knew each other. Neighbors waved from their porches, shop owners greeted customers by name, and children rode their bikes freely down tree-lined streets. But that sense of peace shattered the night the Candy family home became the scene of a gruesome crime. The town was left in shock. The Candys weren't just another family, they were well-loved and respected members of the community. As news of the murders spread, Yukon transformed overnight. The town square, once filled with laughter and the chatter of everyday life, became a solemn gathering place for mourners. Candles flickered in the wind, illuminating the sorrow etched on people's faces. The local church held nightly vigils, the scent of melting wax and fresh flowers lingering in the air. People whispered theories in hushed tones, some struggling to comprehend, others desperately seeking answers. How could this have happened here?
One question haunted everyone. Why had Jonathan Candy, a man who had never shown signs of violence, spared his youngest son? Some believed it was an act of mercy, the last shred of humanity left in him. Others, more disturbed by the thought, wondered if he had done it intentionally to leave behind a witness, someone who would carry the weight of the tragedy forever. Oliver never returned to the house. His relatives took him in, shielding him from the relentless media storm. Reporters camped outside their home, eager to catch a glimpse of the boy whose life had been both spared and shattered in the same night. But Oliver never spoke of it. Some say he couldn't. Others believe he simply refused to give his father the satisfaction of knowing his story would never fade. One thing remained certain: Yukon, Oklahoma, would never forget. Jonathan Candy took his secrets to the grave. But one thing is certain: this was not a crime of passion. It was not a moment of rage. It was planned, cold, and calculated. We may never know the full truth behind that dark April night, but one thing is for sure: the Candy family massacre will forever remain one of the most haunting crimes in American history. What do you think happened that night? Was Jonathan battling unseen demons? Or was this a premeditated act of evil? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. For more chilling true crime cases, make sure to subscribe to Crime Docket and hit that notification bell. You don't want to miss what we uncover next.
And remember, monsters don't always hide in the shadows. Sometimes they live right with us.